I struggle to see where you're going to be relevant in a business setting in 18 months or even 12 months from now, because the world is quickly moving. Your entire executive team should be talking about this almost every day, about how big the transformation is, how important it is for us to engage, set some really strong expectations that your workforce should be coming to the table and should be engaging. People are working harder because they're using AI, but they're also happier because they're able to solve challenges more easily.
2026, the fundamental skill for humans to develop for the future of work, are we saying that's creativity?
I get asked the question often. This is a bit of like a good news, bad news situation. I'll start with the bad news. Is AI going to take your job?
Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Liam, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
There is loads that I want to jump into today, and your point of view is something that's extremely interesting to me, especially because of your background and your interest that you're public about on LinkedIn as well, and how they can kind of tie into what you do professionally. So from what I can see, you study English and history at Rutgers, which is a bit interesting for most of the folks I speak to. They're mostly in technical degrees. You co-found a startup, you build chatbots at a company, you're running CS teams. You're now at UserTesting as the head of AI slash a VP. And you're also a senior wilderness guide, which we talked about. Walk me through all of them in one thread. What is it about you that makes you do these things?
Oh, that is a good question. Really digging deep here from the start. Yeah, I think I think the career that I've had has taken like different turns here and there. I think maybe I'm always interested in like doing something new. And really just kind of like digging into something that's really interesting to me. Like I think a lot of like actually like I would go back to a CRO that we had here at User Testing a couple years ago said something that still resonates with me and it helped me make sense of what my journey has looked like. I think he was comparing himself to our CMO at the time, and what he was saying, he's like, I came out of the womb and I knew that I wanted to be a CRO like my whole life, right? Like I knew that I wanted to go in sales. Like I knew that this was the job for me. Whereas our CMO at the time, I think had a similar kind of journey to me where, she was always thinking about like, okay, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to go spend a couple years like digging into that and really getting involved in that. I think probably like I think neither journey is the right one. You choose the one that makes sense for you. And I think the journey that has maybe made the most sense for me is like, here's something interesting. It deeply connects with something that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to dive into that and spend maybe several years of my life like getting really deeply involved in that thing. Maybe that's the best way I can make sense of it. Right? There's nothing like really that intentional about it. It's really just a matter of following like passions and interests.
Yeah, I mean, I think it aligns closely with how I think about things. The reason I love doing the podcast is because I love following my curiosity. So having conversations with folks like you allows me to kind of dive deep into the mind of someone that's deeply experienced in a subject area for 45, 50 minutes at a time. So I feel that intuition as well and that draw
Yeah.
towards it. It definitely speaks to me as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think maybe the most rewarding way to position your career is it's the intersection of things that you're deeply curious in and the things that you're good at, right? And look, I mean, frankly, like I've gotten involved in things that I've been deeply curious in, but maybe not so good at, right? And like those haven't always been like the greatest moments. But then there's also been things that I've been good at and maybe not as curious in, and those weren't super satisfying moments. I could tell you this, like I'm the head of AI here at User Testing. I've been in this role for about 2 years. And this has probably been my favorite role of my career because I am very deeply curious about all of this stuff. And we've had some success, right? That indicates like maybe I'm decent at this thing. So yeah, like I think it's been super rewarding.
okay, awesome. I really want to jump into everything AI and your role and what you're doing just now. But before we do that, I want to set some context, like who you are. Something that strikes me about your public profile is you talk about being a wilderness guide, and there's also 2 years in your kind of history where you're building this startup or this app around adventure as well. Like,
Yeah.
talk to me about both those things.
Yeah, like, I think that goes to something we were talking about earlier, like, something deeply passionate about, deeply curious about. I have for a long time been very interested and curious about the intersection of, like, technology and humanity, and I think that that was, uh what I was pursuing there was an extension of that passion. So yeah, I've been, a guy that does stuff in the outdoors. Like, I've been very interested in outdoor adventure for a long time. I've been, a wilderness and mountain guide for a long time. And, in the course of doing those things, I recognize like where there's a ton of friction, where that friction shows up. And that startup was an attempt to address that friction and just make that easier for others. So really what that was, the startup was called Grown Ocean. It was a way to, for folks like me to identify, new cool adventure to do, and then help you execute a plan to do those things, but then potentially find others that you could either learn from or even do those things with.
Mm. And being a wilderness guide, I'm thinking about all the parallels that the confidence that that will give you into the position that you're in now. When you first start with user testing, you're a senior global customer success manager. You progressed over 3 or 4 different roles to the point where you're a VP and head of AI. Talk to me about the parallel of like what you learned in the wilderness and how that applies to this.
Oh, really good questions here. Yeah, like I think it's you when you're a wilderness guide, right? Like you're kind of like you're very much in a leadership position. You're leading it's a physical manifestation of leadership, right? So like you're leading people often through some of the most challenging experiences that they've ever had in their lives, right? And it's a matter of, really pushing into uncomfortable places. And I think that that's probably the strongest parallel to what I'm doing right now, right? Anyone who's leading AI transformation in an organization is pushing their organization into really uncomfortable places. And a lot of that is like, I have to, you were asking the whole organization to rethink their approach to work, like rethink the way that that they're going to use tools to, enhance their work. And that's often like a really uncomfortable thing. There's also a governance piece to this, which is, not always the most comfortable thing either. You have to really think about your responsibility in the transformation and making sure that you're fulfilling your obligations to your stakeholders, to your customers, to your workforce, right? And again, like you're just kind of, pushing towards a thing that's really uncomfortable, but also very worth it, right? Like there's very high reward in pushing through that zone of lack of comfort.
Finish these sentences for me.
Okay.
AI transformation is, AI transformation is not.
Uh, AI transformation is really about creativity, and AI transformation is not as much about technology.
Expand on that for me.
Yeah. So you and I were talking about this before we hopped in here. Every company, pretty much every company is trying to figure this AI thing out, right? And I think we saw the initial approach that a lot of companies took was to really think about this the same way that they've thought about other technology shifts in the past. And really indexed, like really over indexed on the technology piece. Um, I think one of the fun things that I do from time to time is look at companies that are hiring an AI transformation leader and what the skill set that they're looking for. And I think a lot of companies are still making the mistake of thinking like that's somebody with 20 years of like Python coding experience. It's someone that like has had, you know, technology leadership in their past. Maybe they're a CTO. And I'd say this, like that's not the wrong person, but you're missing a critical piece to this, and that is creativity, right? And the reason why that's so important is because that this technology looks very different from any other technology that we've ever deployed. in an organization. In the past, you deploy a technology and you're thinking about the buttons to push, the levers to pull. You're thinking about the finite set of use cases within that technology. With AI, it's completely different. It's abstract. It behaves in different ways every time we use it. And it's constantly shifting. And when you deploy AI into your organization, the possibilities are literally infinite. Like there is an infinite number of things that we could do with this technology. Um, Typically, that's like that sounds to me a lot like a creative challenge, right? Like it's let's not try to boil the ocean, but let's think really creatively about how this new capability is going to apply to the most meaningful areas of our business. And I do think that the companies that have made the most progress in AI transformation are thinking about this more as a more as a creative challenge and less as a technology challenge.
Mm. I want to dive into the problem in a second, but I want to start with who exactly that transformation leader is and get
Yeah.
granular with this. I think your experience is interesting, right? Because over the period of just over 7 years, you go through four different roles. So you're hired up internally into this role. And I'm wondering if you were to or if you were to give a piece of advice to other companies looking to hire this AI transformation leader. First of all, would you say hire externally or you think promoting internally is the right move?
It depends. I think try to promote internally first because there are 4 skills that you need that individual to have in order to be an effective transformation leader, an AI transformation leader. So the first is pretty obvious, fluency in AI tools, right? Fluency in the capabilities and, this is an individual. Look, most companies have at least one person or a handful of people who have really rolled up their sleeves and gotten their hands filthy dirty in these capabilities and thinking about how it applies to their work. Like that's a really strong signal that that person might be the person that you want to lead the rest of the organization through this. So that's an obvious one. The second one is a really strong understanding of the business. And that could be, the person maybe maybe they're in HR. They're not in marketing, but they know enough to be dangerous about marketing, right? So they understand all of the functions of the business. They understand the business model really well. They understand the challenges of that business really well. Um, Typically the people that know that stuff really well are the people that are already in our companies. And that's not to say somebody from outside the company can't come in and learn those things pretty quickly because you could use AI tools to, help you figure that stuff out. We're on to skill set number 3. This a really important one. This is 0 to 1 transformation. So this has to be someone that has some kind of proven track record of knowing how to get stuff done. This is complicated. It involves every function of our business, every facet of our business. So this person really needs to understand, okay, like here's this really big thing, and I need to break this thing into smaller parts and make sure that, we're making progress towards that. So those are the first 3 things. The fourth thing that we've already talked about and is often the least obvious to organizations, and that's someone who is deeply creative, right? That's going to think about this really abstract thing that we can do in infinite number of ways and start to get really creative on here are the biggest challenges of this business, and here's how I see those challenges intersecting with these new capabilities to, unlock new potential within the organization. Again, typically that's an exercise in creativity.
Hmm. What have you noticed through promoting AI champions internally? So when you talk about this being a creative problem, my mind automatically goes to the marketing department over the operations department, right? That's where I would find those individuals. But what else am I not seeing when you're trying to find those AI champions or those people that are going to lead that AI transformation? What are you looking for and what have you noticed in terms of correlations?
Yeah, I think so we do have a formal center of excellence here at User Testing. It's about 2 dozen people, cross-functional representation for pretty much every function and team in the business. What I'm usually looking for is so I mentioned those 4 skill sets earlier. I'm usually looking for number 1 and number 4. So number 1 being fluency in AI tools. These are people that are already experimenting, and number 4 is creativity. Um, you know, if you're in marketing and I'm asking you to help the rest of your marketing team truly understand how AI is going to change their roles, like you don't necessarily need to know a ton about like how that applies to HR, right? Because I'm asking you really focus on, your role and roles adjacent to you. And on the kind of 0 to 1 transformation, that's probably the most important role that I play in leading our center of excellence is, helping our folks, figure out like what are the tactical things that we all need to be doing. But yeah, I have found when I look at our center of excellence, the individuals who really index on, skill number 1 and skill number 4 are usually the most effective. They're the people who are already thinking really creatively about the tools. They're engaged every day and how those tools are changing. And we're having a constant dialogue amongst ourselves and then with the rest of the organization around what that means.
Give me 30 seconds and I'll give you the secret to effective AI implementation. If you like the AI report, you already know what we're about, cutting through the hype and helping leaders actually use AI. At Upscale, we're more than a newsletter or even this podcast. We work with global organizations like the Society for Human Resource Management and Fisher Phillips Law Partners to train entire departments, boosting efficiency and productivity by an average of 41% in just weeks. If you want your company ahead of the curve instead of chasing it, book a free strategy call at upscale.com. That's UPSCAILE.com. Schedule today and future-proof your tomorrow.
Maybe you haven't, but have you noticed any tendencies towards any demographics, psychographics, locations, ages, genders? Is there anything that usually kind of, I guess, suggests that they might be open to this more than other individuals?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, our center of excellence is a kind of pretty dynamic group of people. Like, I don't see them indexing on like one demographic or psychographic. Again, I think the most important thing is looking for people who are already doing really interesting experiments and, obviously know their roles pretty well. Um, I don't know that this is, they're subject matter experts in whatever role that they natively exist within. So obviously that's super important. But again, if they're already experimenting, if they're thinking really creatively, if I already see them talking to, you know, the rest of their team or, other teams that might be adjacent to them about the things that they're doing, like those are pretty strong signals to me that they'll be very effective in that role.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the only reason I ask is part of our business is we do enterprise training. So we go into organizations like SHRM, Fisher Phillips, Mertz, and we do training, and we kind of notice time and time again that it tends to be people that are a little bit older and that are
Mm.
actually kind of leading this transformation. That might be due to seniority. They have more time on their hands to be able to experiment. They have more leeway. But we tend to find it's people around like 45 to 55 that like are the people experimenting more in their free time and building apps with Lovable and
Yeah.
playing around with Perplexity.
That's interesting. I haven't noticed that, but
Mm.
not saying that you're wrong or even that that doesn't exist here, right? Like it's just probably not something I'm like really putting under a microscope.
Cool. I think some important context for the audience around all of this is what user testing actually does. So when I go onto a website, what I find is a tagline, craft experiences that win hearts and markets, find the why, then build faster, smarter, and with confidence. Break that down for me.
Yeah. So very simply, what user testing is, we are a platform that helps you build great experiences for your customers by helping you capture their perspectives about, anything that you want to capture a perspective on. Often that's, digital experiences, that it also extends into out in the wild experiences as well. So if you're an organization that understands how important it is for you to really be intentional about the experience that you're providing your customers and your stakeholders, chances are that, you're a customer of user testing, right? Because that is what our platform does. That's what our set of solutions do here at user testing is, we help you understand what it's like to be your customer.
Mm. From what I understand, you work with 75 out of the top Fortune 100, something along those lines.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Right. So with that, I want to get granular with that for a second. So when I'm doing research on you, one of the things that keeps popping up on YouTube about user testing is like people making money from doing in-person tests, like interviews, stuff like that. So I want to break down like what that actual experience is. Something that comes to mind is that you're capturing not just data points on how someone reacts to something, how they score something, but you're capturing like their emotions and evaluating that as well. So break that down a little more for me.
Yeah. What you're, kind of highlighting there is really critical. And that's the qualitative data that you are able to capture through a solution like user testing. Um, there are no shortage of tools that will tell you, what's happening in an experience. Like, for example, if you're, a retail brand and e-commerce is a really big part of, um, your business, you have all sorts of telemetry tools that are telling you about, where people are clicking, what they're buying, how much time they're spending on your site, where they're coming from, right? But really none of those tools are telling you like why any of that stuff is happening, right? So that's where user testing comes in is, many teams that use user testing, already understand like what's happening. They just don't understand why it's happening. And they're able to drill really deeply into their customer perspectives and get a really strong understanding of that kind of like qualitative feedback and that experience that they're providing to the world. And I think that's really important, right? Like that's kind of the empathy gap that I think a lot of brands do experience by not capturing uh, that qualitative data, and that's where user testing really shines. And we have like quant tools as well. We have survey tools, but often again, like really what's missing from the way that brands are delivering experiences, being able to empathize with their customers.
You being so deep in the weeds with this really interests me because I think the most interesting part of my job is understanding the why behind why people do things, how they operate, why they choose to go for that career, that job, or that relationship. And
I can tell by the questions you're asking that that's yeah.
it's literally the name of the show as well. I recently changed it to the IY, so it's part of who I am. So with you being so deeply ingrained in this, so much experience, I'm curious what you've learned about what motivates humans. Like, why do humans make the decisions that they make? What motivates them? What does it come down to at a base level?
I think that's gonna be different for every person, right? Incentives are what motivates people, and that's broadly like what's gonna drive someone to do one thing versus another. And all of us connect with different types of incentives. I don't know if that's helpful, right? Like, I don't know if that's helping you like dive into like psyche here, but yeah, look, I mean, the way that I think about this, yeah, let's bring this to the work that I do within our organization every day, right? That incentive piece is something I think about quite often. I think that, my incentive in doing this is uh, probably more responsibility than anything else. Like there's an opportunity piece, but then there's a responsibility piece. And what I see is a world that's changing, right? Like what we're looking at is one of the most transformational moments in human history. It sounds like a bold statement, but I believe that's true. And one of the big incentive drivers for me is to make sure is to fulfill this responsibility that I think all organizations have to their workforce, which is to lead through the transformation. Like this is going to impact us all, right? Like no one gets out of this without being impacted. And I want to make sure that our workforce has the right pathways to navigate through the transformation. And that is a pretty deep responsibility. Again, I think that companies have to their workforce. And what I've been telling other companies recently is if you don't have a real robust formal AI transformation program within your organization, stop telling the world you're a good employer because you're not. You're not fulfilling that responsibility. And that's again like going back to this incentive thing. I think that's a big part of what drives this mission here. there's a big opportunity side to this as well, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a there's an economic side to this that makes a lot of sense for us and makes a lot of sense for other organizations too. But there's also that responsibility piece.
It's a pretty selfless point of view to have, I think. Some
I actually don't. It sounds like kind of like high horse, like selfless, but it's not. Like it's actually pretty selfish, and I'll explain why. Again, I think we're living through one of the most transformational moments in human history. Um, and there are a couple different ways that this could play out. So, one way that this could play out is none of us come to the table, none of us engage with these new capabilities, none of us have a really strong understanding of the right and wrong ways that this should continue to play out. In that scenario, then basically what we're saying is, um, the kind of like tech overlords are going to decide what our future looks like for us. I'm not interested in that scenario. I'm actually more interested in a scenario where we all do come to the table. We engage with these new capabilities. We engage with this new technology. Have a really nuanced conversation about the right and wrong ways for this to continue to play out. And in that scenario, this becomes more democratized, and we can decide collectively about what that means for us. Like that's the scenario that I personally and selfishly more interested in. And that's why my ask, and I do feel like again, this is a responsibility, but like my ask of really everyone is to like figure this out, right? Come to the table, use these tools, experiment as much as possible. Let's all have a really deeply informed opinion about what we all want this thing to look like in the next 6 months, 6 years, 20 years, right? Um, Again, that's the scenario I'm more interested in.
Let's break that down because I could talk forever about why, and I've got a million questions about why you think that way. But
Yeah.
let's let's talk specifics, right? So we're talking about AI transformation programs. We have an understanding of who that has to start with, but break down maybe the components for me. So like the governance, the training, the leadership, the metrics, the tooling. Like how do I institute an AI transformation program that's actually going to make a difference?
Yeah, so I think this starts down by thinking about this as a top down, bottom up approach. So the top down is as leaders in an organization, your entire executive team should be talking about this almost every day, about how big the transformation is, how important it is for us to engage, set some really strong expectations that your workforce should be coming to the table and should be engaging, um, and talk about what happens if you don't, right? Like what happens, what's the scenario for our organization and what's the scenario for each of us as individuals if we don't engage and experiment today. Um, I don't think that that looks good for probably any of us. So again, like your leadership is going to set the tone, that top down tone. And then you need to provide bottom up enablement. Create your center of excellence. Identify the people who are experimenting. Put a spotlight on those folks. Uh, Provide the right training and enablement so that folks know how to use this really abstract technology. Have this conversation in your organization every day and enable, anyone from any level of the organization to say, here's how I'm using AI, right? Here's the difference that it's had in my role. Here's how others might, draw some inspiration from the way that I'm using it. Just continue to have that conversation. Um, and then, maybe the middle layer here is monitoring what's happening. So monitoring your adoption, monitoring where it's driving the most value in your organization. I talk a lot about measuring the ROI of AI. There's a school of thought. I think for the last couple of years, mostly people are saying like, well, we can't measure this because, it's like electricity. Like we don't measure electricity. We don't measure the value of electricity because it's just table stakes. Like we know we're supposed to be doing it. But I think part of me agrees with that, right? Like this does feel like table stakes, and there's no real clear roadmap yet of like how to do this. But one of the things that we do is we know it's important for us to identify where AI is driving the most value within our organization. So on a quarterly basis, we look at the 10 most meaningful implementations of AI in the company, and we develop some like ROI calculations of like what actually happened as a result of bringing an AI solution, into different parts of the company. And that what that does is it actually helps us have the conversations around like, we're spending this much money. Are we getting value right? Like it helps drive those conversations. But more importantly, I think it helps us identify if we're able to drive this much value here, we know that we can do something similar in this part of the organization. So it helps us prioritize the things that we're going to do. Because again, one of the things we talked about earlier is there are an infinite number of things that you could do, but you should really get hyper focus on where you're going to extract the most value.
When you're talking about ROI, obviously everyone's brain goes to bottom line, right? How much money can we make? How efficient can we be? How much money can we save? How much time can we save? But considering what you guys do and what the companies build around that qualitative data, that unseen value, talk to me about ROI that's not seen, that's not bottom line.
Yeah, well, I think this so the way that I talk about this often is you're going to have like squishy metrics and hard metrics, like squishy ROI, hard ROI. So the squishy ROI is again kind of something like what we were talking about earlier, where we know that we need electricity, like we know that we need internet, but our CFO is not saying like, okay, well, we spent this much money on electricity and we spent this much money on internet. Show me the ROI calculation that says that that was worthwhile, right? Like that's not happening because obviously those are table stakes things that we need. And I think that that's where AI comes in and maybe connects to your question is we know that we're supposed to be doing this. I think other things you can look at in the organization is level of satisfaction of employees. There have been some recent studies that have shown that people are working harder because they're using AI, but they're also happier because they're able to solve challenges more easily. Like if you're a motivated individual and without AI, you have all these challenges that you're trying to meet in your role. It's hard, right? Like it's harder to do that without like having extra resources. But what AI does is it gives you, you know, expertise and resource to be able to meet those challenges with greater efficiency, with greater rigor. And again, like if you're a motivated person, that's going to make you happier. Again, and also I think that again, something we touched on earlier is I think most people want to work in a company that's driving AI transformation because again, we recognize that this is all going to change our lives and it's really hard and abstract. And if you're working at an organization that's taking this really seriously, I think that there's some satisfaction in that as well. And again, like those are kind of like the squishier things that are harder to measure, but you know that they're important. You know that uh, a happier workforce is going to produce better results. A happier workforce is going to make it easier for you to recruit top talent, retain top talent. So I think that's part of this as well, and that's the other side of like the hard metrics that we look at when we bring an AI solution into the sales team, and now we're booking 130% more discovery calls, and we know what the value of every discovery call is because it's something that we track very closely. Like that has a really very specific bottom line metric to it.
I want to tie a few different things together. When I do my research and you and listen to the other podcasts, you, I mean, you're an example of successful AI transformation in my eyes, right? I mean, some of the numbers that came up over 70% weekly active AI users, it might be over 75%. This was 8 months ago now.
It's
Um,
virtually
we're
100 at this point.
okay, virtually 100 now, right? Over 600 custom GPTs and an
Yep.
800 person organization within 8 months. And we can update those numbers in a second. But I'm wondering, how exactly did you build that culture of experimentation? How did you tie that into incentives that we've talked about before? And how does the discussion of job displacement fit in there as well?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in there. So, let's start with the culture shift.
Sure.
I would say we started with a little bit of wind in our back because we were already a pretty experimental culture. Just by the nature of our product, we're helping other companies experiment with different things that they're trying to do. And some of that spills over into the DNA of the people who work here, right? Like we're just more of an experimental culture. But again, like I think we recognized very early on how meaningful this shift was going to be with AI. So we started early, right? Like we started talking about this really early in our organization. We started a top-down conversation, which said like, "Hey, like this is something really big," and this started back in 2023, right? Um, we had these conversations, and it promoted this natural curiosity, I think, at user testing. And by the time that that curiosity reached, a specific threshold, we brought more AI tools in, and people were happy that they have tools that match their curiosity, right? So again, I think that that was a kind of like this maybe organic thing that was happening. And really on the more intentional side, one of the things that we started to see early on when we brought AI tools in is when we built when we started to customize these tools, then people started to really understand them more. And really what I mean by this is custom GPTs. So ChatGPT Enterprise has been our center of gravity general purpose AI solution for the past 2 years. And one of the reasons why we went in that direction is we were interested in the feature where you can build a custom GPT that connects to a specific workflow or, a specific process in the organization. We started to build these for workflows, and we also fully democratized the ability for people to build them, right? Like we put not a ton of guardrails on building custom GPTs. Like everyone had the ability to do it. If you wanted to build something for the rest of the organization, then that's where I would get involved. But yeah, like I think that level of experimentation just unlocked greater curiosity, greater interest, greater adoption, right? Because maybe using just the general ChatGPT Compose tool felt intimidating because you weren't really sure what to do with it. If you're sure what to do with it and you use it as a Google search and you're like, "Oh, okay, it's a little bit better than Google." But then once you start thinking about how AI applies into specific workflows and you start building a custom solution for that workflow, then you have your aha moment. You're like, "Oh, okay, I get this now. And I figured this out for this workflow. Now there's 50 other workflows that I have a good sense of how to bring this in." So I think that that created a lot of virality in just people thinking really creatively about how AI applies to their roles. And,
Can
yeah,
I
just
interrupt that? I'm really curious what that conversation looked like because when I think people get that now, but back in 2023, you're having to have a conversation with your employees, like take time out of your own day to go and
yeah.
experiment and play around with AI to see what you can kind of build. Like, are you cordoning off a certain amount of time that they can go and do that? What does a leadership discussion look like?
I don't think that we were, like, so specific to say, like, "Hey, like, take 2 hours out of your day every day to, like, build a custom GPT or figure that out," right? So, I think that when we first started rolling out ChatGPT Enterprise, we actually did some hackathons, and those hackathons were probably mostly around building custom GPTs, so bringing subject matter experts in our teams to a place where we're all gonna, for a couple hours, like, figure out how to customize this thing for workflows that they're engaged in every day. And even if those folks were showing up not having, like, a really strong understanding of what the capabilities of the tools are, they figured it out pretty quickly, right? In that kinda setting, it's like, "Okay, like, this is a big challenge in my role, and I'm sitting with 2 other people that have that same challenge, and you're telling me that this thing can help me with that, so let's figure this out," right? So after doing a couple rounds of that, that created some virality. And, some of those GPTs that we would build in these hackathons would then be taken back to the company and into the teams. And we would show, if you were a BDR, right? And you build a GPT that helps you improve your process, you show the other BDRs and they're like, whoa, like I want to use that too. And another specific example that we saw this kind of like big shift in adoption and people capturing their own aha moments was I think it was maybe the beginning of last year. We built a custom GPT that helped everyone in our company write OKRs. So everyone, every company goes through this goal setting exercise at the beginning of their year, and often it's like a structured set of OKRs or KPIs or V2 moms, right? Whatever your framework is. The thing is, like, none of us are really good at that, right? Like, in order to really get value out of that exercise, you have to be pretty good at knowing like what does a good set of OKRs or V2 moms look like. And none of us really have the time to be that expert. So I think, my ask of the organization is like, I don't want anyone to be good at writing OKRs, but I want you to have a good set of OKRs, right? Like I want you to have a good set of goals that align to the work that you're doing and have that connect to the work that other people are doing. So we built a custom GPT around that. And that was really trained in the John Doerr methodology of building great OKRs. And we did this like through every level of our organization. So we would set company level OKRs and we would train the GPT on that. Our executive team would create their OKRs. Our senior leadership team would create their OKRs, right? Mid level line managers would create theirs. So wherever you sat in the organization, by the time you're writing your OKRs, the GPT that you're using is not only trained in great methodology, but it's also trained in what are other people in the company working on, right? Like what matters most to this company. So then you can get really aligned on like again the general goals of the company.
Mm. I want to break down the incentives for a second. When you're
Sure.
talking about this culture of experimentation, few things come to mind. I mean, the baseline of how dopamine and like skill development works is like seeing the action of your result and seeing gradual incremental improvements, right? That's just how the human brain works. That's why we like to do things. That's why we like to learn things. I imagine there's some respect from their peers, the admiration of the people around them for building something or creating something. What else is the incentive here? Like, why are people doing this other than that?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question, and again, I think this comes back to like there's a different set of incentives for all of us. So on one side of the maybe incentive spectrum, you have people who are just naturally curious and intrinsically motivated. And us providing these tools and pathways to use these tools, pathways to create a custom solution that they can bring to the rest of their teams or organization, connects, right? Connects with that curiosity and intrinsic motivation. That's one side of incentives. On the other side of the incentives is this constant conversation that we have in the company, which is how big this transformation is, how much it's going to impact us, and maybe like setting a little bit of FOMO, right? Like if you're a person that decides today to sit on the sidelines and not engage, then like the frank and honest feedback that I would give that person is I struggle to see where you're going to be relevant in a business setting in 18 months or even 12 months from now, right? Because the world is quickly moving in that direction. So maybe it's a little bit of like fear setting, FOMO setting, and it's a little bit of like matching intrinsic motivation. There's not really a direct financial incentive. Like like there's not like a concrete thing where like if you use these AI tools, we're going to give you like uh this bonus, right? Like that doesn't really happen. I don't think it needs to happen, right? Like I think that um as long as you're connecting to the things that matter for folks, then that's what matters. Actually, I think there's a thing we're missing here too, which is um we all want our work to be easier, right? We all want to produce better outcomes in our work and making sure that we continue to have the conversation of why doing it this way makes your life easier, why it helps you achieve better outcomes. Like that connects to a really important incentive too.
Yeah, right. Like the future of work can be way more creative and less mundane. I don't have
Right.
to input items into a spreadsheet. I can talk to AI and dream up stuff, right? It's a
Exactly.
new vision.
What are the mundane things that you're doing in your job that you like really don't love, right? And that's like a great use case for AI. Actually, one of the things I talk to our sales team about often is no one hired you because you're great at updating Salesforce, right? Like no one hired you because like you know how to fill out like fields and objects in Salesforce. We hired you because you're really good at moving deals forward. We hired you because you're really good at um spreading enthusiasm and excitement for the solution that user testing brings to market, right? Like, I want to give you more time to do that. Like, I don't want you to have to spend all this time updating all these fields in Salesforce or updating these spreadsheets or where all the million places that we have to document our work. I want to give people the time and more time and more space to be really focused on the things that they're really good at.
2026, the fundamental skill for humans to develop for the future of work, are we saying that's creativity?
I would say creativity is probably the most important skill today. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm picturing inside work, you're getting them to be creative with AI, but is it worth investing in other pursuits that can allow creativity is a skill, right? I don't think it's an innate quality. So is it worth having like employee training almost on them pursuing other creative skills, painting, writing, whatever, right? And an ability for them to flex that muscle in different domains.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know is the right is or is my answer, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Actually, I'll go back to a question that you asked me earlier. And is there like any kind of like demographic or psychographic that we recognize in people who are adopting faster? And I do think that it is people who have creative pursuits outside of their core work. I have noticed that many of the people who are adopting and experimenting with AI faster than others are people who woodwork and paint and do music or whatever, like in their spare time. I have noticed that pattern. And again, like not surprising, again, because the theme we keep coming back to is creativity, right? You don't have to be like a good woodworker. You don't have to be a good musician. Like it's really just like the spirit of experimentation, I think is what matters there. So yeah, I mean, Liam, going back to your question, in a perfect world, if I had budget to carve out to like allow people to, take painting classes or cooking classes, that helps them explore more of their creativity, sure. I don't know how realistic it is for us to spend a ton of money on that, like, to be honest with you, but, um, I mean, sure, it doesn't hurt to maybe promote this stuff and talk about, like, "Hey, like, maybe it's not a bad idea for you to start exercising more of your creative muscles."
Yeah. I wonder if you end up becoming a first mover and you have company mandated woodworking. I'd love to see that come into fruition and see the results from that.
We're all gonna take a week and do an offsite, some woodworking shop.
That'd be great. Let me know. I'd love an invite as well if it's going. All right.
All right, you'll be the first to know.
I want to bring things back to the technology and have a quick discussion just before we finish off. So you mentioned a lot about custom GPTs, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering something that's huge right now is agents, right? Yesterday, Perplexity just announced Perplexity Computer.
Yep.
Claude obviously had co-work recently as well. How does that fit into user testing?
It fits into user testing in a really big way. So we are about 2 years into our formal transformation, AI transformation journey. Um, that the first 2 years, first 18 months, 2 years really is what we consider phase 1. Phase 1 was about bringing tools, training, enablement to the workforce that gives us pathways to, use and experiment with these tools. We're moving into phase 2 now, and phase 2 is gonna be 3 things. It's gonna be number 1, it's gonna be doing more of what we were doing in phase 1, right? Because that doesn't stop or slow down, it accelerates. Number 2 is connect institutional knowledge to AI, and number 3 is orchestrate agents to meaningful workflows around the business. We've been doing some, like, lightweight experiments. We have a lot of use cases that we've identified as, kinda the low-hanging fruit, low level of effort, high value agents. I have spent much of the last 8 or 9 months, evaluating all these, agentic orchestration platforms, and, we are quickly moving in the direction of bringing, like, one of these big platforms into user testing. And I think in a lot of ways, like, we start our journey all over again in that we bring in these, like, massively abstract, massively powerful new capabilities. Uh, we roll that out across the company, and then we guide people through how this is going to make a difference in their lives. We identify like a group of builders that are going to help us, build and orchestrate this into, workflows around the business. So yeah, like it's really the phase 2 of the transformation is how I see agentic AI.
You mentioned these different agent orchestration platforms.
Mhm.
Maybe you can't speak about it 'cause you said you're in the process of bringing one out. but can you speak?
I'm not gonna tell you when we're doing a POC for, but yeah, this is happening.
Um, well, let me ask you this, then let me rephrase that. I can't ask you what platform you're bringing in, but I can ask you, what do you think is overrated and underrated right now? What do you think people misinterpret or misunderstand in both directions?
It's a good question. I think so. We're having this conversation like quite often in the company, and for several months, I have been talking to leaders and really anyone around the company to help me identify what is the work that you're doing that might be a really good fit to like build some agentic capabilities around. One of the things I keep noticing is that um, like I need to set expectations around capabilities, right? Because a lot of times when we're having these conversations, people like think that this is like a truly like a magic wand, right? And they're going to wave a magic wand and all of a sudden like everything gets better and all of a sudden like it's like they're thinking about this in maybe like a grander way than maybe what you should be thinking about, right? And like directionally, I think a lot of that is true, right? Like directionally, I think like we'll get to that point, but we need to take a much more intentional strategy. And I think that intentional strategy is like, let's look at specific workflows. We'll look at specific ways that we can significantly improve our business. User testing is a SaaS company. And there are three things that really matter to our business. One is we want to grow our revenue. Two is we want to retain our customers. And three is we want to increase our product velocity. So when we have this conversation in the organization, we want to make sure that the use cases that we're identifying that we want to build connect to at least one of those three different vectors. And we're not trying to boil the ocean, right? Like we're trying to get like really specific. So I think like maybe the uh, thing that I can't remember exactly how you asked your question. Like the thing that maybe is like overrated is like people think of this as like this magic box that we're going to bring in. We're going to wave the magic wand, and all of a sudden, like everything's easier. Like it's not quite that, right? I think we need to manage expectations around what's going to matter most for the business today based on these capabilities, and we will continue to grow a strategy around that. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if
It does. It does.
okay, good.
I I want to finish off by knowing a little bit more about what your plans for the future are with the company. I think a narrative that's really common right now is the idea of the SaaS apocalypse, right? And I speak
Yeah.
to two or three kind of C-suite execs at $100 million companies a week, and it's just something I'd love to know about. I spoke with a company 2 weeks ago that do like business presentation decks, and they work with OpenAI, they work with Anthropic, they
Yeah.
are kind of one of their plugins. So I'm wondering, moving forward for the next 3, 5, 10 years, how do you think about hedging yourself against this?
Good question. Um, I will start by saying, so we're recording this on February 26th, and this is obviously something that like this has been put under a microscope. And the way that we're seeing this playing out is a lot of legacy SaaS companies are taking a big hit in their market cap because the expectation is that, companies like Salesforce and ServiceNow and Adobe, right? Like the expectation is like a company like User Testing isn't going to need Salesforce in 18 months because we're just going to vibe code a CRM. I think that that is a highly overrated expectation. I don't think that's true. And look, I mean, we're gonna vibe code stuff, and maybe there are some tools that we're not gonna bring into the organization. But look, I think when it comes to like the conversation around the SaaS apocalypse, I think that's been a little bit overrated. Um, Now, when I think about what user testing, you ask a really good question, and I think it's like, how do you position a SaaS company to be relevant in a future where it like creating product just gets a lot easier, like creating solutions gets a lot easier. For user testing, the heart of what we're doing, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is giving you an empathy perspective of what it's like to be your customer. And one of the things our customers keep asking us about is like, what is our strategy in um, giving them the ability to get like synthetic feedback or using synthetic users to get that feedback. And, I think our opinion is I think that will actually play a role in the way that you're able to capture feedback. But it is in no way going to be a replacement from getting real feedback from real people. I think that that's never going to go away. You know, as long as you're providing an experience to real people, you're going to want to hear about what that real experience. You want to hear from those real people about what that experience looks like. So that has signaled to us that we user testing has a panel of real people, of millions of people around the world, and we want to make it easier than ever for companies to find highly relevant cohorts of individuals to tap into to get that feedback. And that, it's always been a very big part of our product strategy. And I think that maybe that gets elevated in importance is making sure that we're making it really easy for you to capture real feedback from real people.
Do you think SaaS companies that have no link or no aspect of real human contact in them, they're a bit more in the mud?
I don't know because I think it just depends on what the expectations of their customers are, right? Like they should go figure that out, right? Like they should actually capture feedback from people to see, does it matter that you're only interacting with chatbots or agents, right? Like does that matter, or do you actually want to talk to a real person or have a real person behind the scenes? Like that actually I think is a crucial question that every company needs to be figuring out right now. And when you're providing these agentic experiences, or even if it's just like an AI assistant, like you need to figure out how your customers feel about that, right? Like even the tone of how a chatbot might talk to you, like that really matters. So I do think that companies have this opportunity to figure out like what is their nuanced version of this. And a big part of figuring that out is understanding like what your customers actually want from you.
This entire conversation, you've came at every discussion from an extremely practical angle. AI is coming. We need to be prepared for it. You've also been very insightful. Like, don't take this as an insult. This is just framing. So, I think what I'm curious about is like you, on an individual level, when you think about AI coming, are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic? Me personally, although that I cover this every day and I work in it, I'm a little I'm a little cynical around it. I think that phrases a lot of my questions. It's the mindset I take, and that's why I do the job that I do. But I'm curious for you as an individual, how do you think about it?
I don't know that I think about it as like pessimism versus optimism because I think it depends on the day, right?
Mm.
Maybe the days I feel a little bit more pessimistic are when I read Matt Schumer's article about like how he says that it's February of 2020 and we're about to experience this like massive pandemic, right? Like maybe I feel a little bit more pessimistic on those days. The days I feel a little bit more optimistic are when I see how AI is changing the way that we work within our company and providing massive lifts in efficiency, massive lifts in rigor. It's allowing individuals to do, something in 20 minutes that used to take them 2 weeks, right? Like those are the days I feel really optimistic. It's really hard to know what's going to happen next, right? Like I think we know that this is going to continue to expand in capabilities. Um, I get asked the question often, and I think you asked it earlier, and I didn't address it. Is the fear of AI taking your job, right?
Sure.
Here's so this is a bit of like a good news, bad news situation. So I'll start with the bad news. Is AI going to take your job? We don't know. We don't know if AI is going to take your job. But also, here's the good news. We don't know. We don't know if AI is going to take your job, right? It's kind of the same answer for both. Like any speculation around the level of job displacement, job disruption is very speculative at this point. And again, like I think this comes back to this responsibility piece that we were talking about earlier. And this is where, again, like this gets more practical is knowing that we don't know and knowing that like the capabilities are expanding. Like I think the practical thing for all of us to do is experiment, figure out what it means for us personally, figure out what it means for us in our work. And let's go into the future a little bit more informed or with like thoughtful opinions about what we want out of this thing.
That is the most honest answer I think I've had or heard from someone in public media. I think
That's unfortunate to hear because I think that we all have to be honest about this. Like if you're a leader in your organization and you're rolling out AI and you're like rolling out a structured transformation, you need to answer that question honestly. Like this is not a time for to be disingenuous.
yeah, I think we need more of it. I think part of the reason I do this and I'm recording this and I love doing the podcast is because a lot of the media around AI out there right now is these big tech CEOs and they get on and they speak of all these utopian benefits of it. And then when it comes to addressing like these tougher questions, for example, job displacement, it's, oh, this will be the second coming of the industrial revolution and there'll be loads more jobs. Just this
Yeah,
level of dishonesty that
that's a
a great
mistake.
answer.
That's a mistake because that actually heightens fear around AI because like people know that's not like an actual genuine
Yeah.
or even like a nuanced thought. Also, I think we should stop comparing this to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution happened over a period of about 80 years, and it was a very, very painful 80 years for most people that were involved in it. So let's stop comparing it to that.
I would love that. I'd love that. I'll get that over to the big tech PR firms. We'll have to make it happen.
I have one conversion. Flip.
I want to finish off with one question that I ask every single one of my guests. I'll give you no further context. I encourage you to take 5 to 10 seconds before you answer. And to preface, I've heard every which response from I love it, I do it for my family, and it's important to me for work. I love problem solving, whatever. Michael, why do you do what you do?
It's good. Another good question. Like I think it's a convergence of a lot of things. One is curiosity. Uh, two is a recognition that this is I'm always like usually drawn to really big challenges. This feels like a really big challenge. This feels like the biggest challenge of the moment. Um, and also it's a recognition that if I don't do this, then I don't know what else I am gonna do. Um, you know, I would say that like I'm not like a newcomer to building AI solutions, right? Like I've been building AI solutions for 10 years. And I was around a lot of people don't remember the last hype or don't think about often the last hype cycle around AI, which started around 2016 and lasted until about 2019, 2020. And that's when like every company felt like they needed a Facebook Messenger bot, an Alexa skill, a Slack bot, a Skype bot, a Google Assistant action, an Apple Home experience, right? Conversational AI was like a really uh, kind of hypey thing 10 years ago. And I was around in that moment building a lot of those experiences for companies. And having built many of those experiences using this is when we were mostly using just like NLP technology, natural language processing. And there was a big gulf between like the expectation of users using these things and what these things were actually capable of doing. Um, so having had that experience, like I think that was like the mindset that I came in November of 2022 when OpenAI launches ChatGPT 3.5. I thought we were still 5 to 10 years away from that. Turns out we weren't, and because I had that experience, it was a moment that I was able to recognize very quickly how important it was because it was like okay, like I've been waiting for this for a while and thought we were still further out. So that experience connects with curiosity, connects with a passion to do hard things. I guess that's the answer to your question. That's why I'm doing this.
Cool. Michael, two things. One, I want to thank you for coming on, spending the time with me. I really appreciate it. And two, if people want to find out more about who you are, what you do, or get in contact, how do they go about doing that?
Probably the best way is to,
Follow me on LinkedIn. Yeah, just search for Michael J. Domanic on LinkedIn.
Cool.
And yeah, feel free to shoot me a message, especially, if you're someone that's trying to drive AI transformation in your organization. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how that's going.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Michael.
Liam, thank you so much for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Appreciate it.